Father, I can't believe it's you.
Believe it. We have much to discuss.
The day his father died, the house did not cry. No prayers filled the air. No neighbors gathered at the door. No hands reached out to comfort the son who stood alone in the center of the living room. There was only silence, thick and heavy, pressing down like a weight on the chest. The kind of silence that made every breath feel loud, every thought impossible to escape. The son stood still, staring at the covered body resting on the floor. The white cloth rose slightly where his father's chest once moved. Now it did not move at all. The man who had filled his childhood with commands, rules, and long stretches of cold distance lay quiet, unable to speak or judge anymore. And yet the son felt no relief. He had imagined this moment many times. He thought death would end the anger, that it would close the door on years of disappointment and hurt. Instead, it opened something deeper, something restless and painful. His father had not died in a dramatic way. There was no accident, no sudden illness, no mystery that needed solving. His body had simply failed, worn down by age and regret. But the emotional weight of his death felt unfinished, as if something important had been left undone. Growing up, the son had learned early that love in their house came with conditions. His father believed in discipline more than warmth, silence more than understanding. Praise was rare. Mistakes were remembered. When the son tried to speak, his words were often met with sharp looks or short replies. Over time, he learned to stay quiet, to swallow his feelings, to stand tall even when he felt small inside. There were moments when he hoped things would change. Moments when he believed his father might soften, might see him not as a problem to fix but as a son to love. But those moments passed, leaving behind only bitterness and questions. Now, standing before his father's body, those old feelings returned like ghosts. Family members began to arrive later that day. Their voices were low and careful. They spoke of traditions, of proper rites, of respect for the dead. They expected the son to follow what had always been done, to prepare the burial, to say the prayers, to close the chapter the right way. But the son did not move. When they asked, he said nothing at first. His silence confused them. Then finally he spoke. He refused. He would not bury his father the way they demanded. The room went still. Shock passed from face to face. Some whispered in anger. Others shook their heads in disbelief. To them this was a cruel act, a violation of duty and faith. But to the son it was something else. It was the first choice that truly felt like his own. For years he had obeyed. He had bent himself into shapes that never fit. He had carried the weight of expectations that were never spoken kindly. Now, with his father unable to command him anymore, the son felt a strange sense of control rise within him. This was not revenge. It was resistance. Yet even as he stood firm, unease settled into the house. The body remained where it was, waiting. The rituals were left unfinished. Night fell without prayer, without closure. Shadows stretched across the walls, longer than they should have been. The son tried to sleep, but the air felt wrong, thick, restless, watching. It was as if the house itself held its breath. Somewhere between anger and grief, something had been disturbed. A balance broken. The dead had been denied their rest, and the living had claimed a power they did not fully understand. As the night deepened, the son felt it clearly for the first time. This death was not over, and his father had not accepted it. The son's refusal did not come from a single moment. It was not born in that quiet room with the covered body. It had been growing for years, slowly, quietly, like a crack spreading through stone. As a child, he had once believed his father was strong because he was right. His father's voice was firm, his rules clear. There was safety in knowing what was expected. But as the years passed, that firmness turned into distance and the rules became walls. His father was not a cruel man in obvious ways. He did not shout without reason or raise his hand often. His cruelty was quieter. It lived in long silences at the dinner table. In the way his eyes moved past his son as if looking for something better. In the way praise was always delayed, always earned but never given. When the son brought home good grades, his father asked why they were not higher. When he worked hard, his father reminded him of those who worked harder. Love, when it appeared, felt brief and unsure, like a visitor who never planned to stay. The son learned to measure himself by what he lacked. As a teenager, he began to push back. Not loudly, not openly, but inside. He asked questions his father did not like. He dreamed of a life that did not follow the narrow path laid out for him. Each time he tried to explain himself, his father responded with disappointment, wrapped in the language of duty and sacrifice. "I do this for you," his father would say, though his actions felt more like control than care. There were moments, small, fragile moments, when forgiveness stood within reach. Once, after a long argument, his father had paused as if searching for the right words. The son waited, heart pounding, hoping for something softer. But the pause ended in silence, and silence became the answer. Another time years later, when illness had begun to slow his father's steps, the son considered speaking honestly. He rehearsed the words in his mind, imagining release. But fear held him back. Fear of rejection, fear of weakness, fear that nothing would change. So nothing did. The father carried his own wounds, though he never named them. He had been raised the same way, taught that emotions were dangerous, that authority mattered more than tenderness. He believed he was shaping his son for survival, not knowing he was teaching him distance instead. Regret lived quietly in him, buried under pride. He noticed the growing space between them but did not know how to cross it. Apologies felt like failure. Vulnerability felt like loss of control. Both men waited for the other to move first. Neither did. When death came, it brought no final words. No chance to explain. No moment of understanding. Just a body and years of unsaid truth. After the refusal, the son stood before his family and spoke with calm certainty. He said tradition meant nothing without sincerity. That respect could not be forced after death if it had been absent in life. He framed his choice as honesty, as moral courage. They listened, but they did not agree. His relatives reminded him of duty, of faith, of consequences. They warned him that unfinished rituals invite unrest, that denying burial is not just an insult, it is a wound to the soul. Elders spoke of balance, of how the living must guide the dead to rest. The son nodded but did not bend. Inside, however, his certainty was not as solid as it appeared. When he was alone, doubt crept in. He remembered moments he had pushed aside. His father standing quietly at his graduation, unsure where to place his hands. His father asking simple questions about his life, then retreating when answers grew complex. He remembered the way his father's voice softened during illness, though the words remained careful and restrained. He remembered noticing sadness in his eyes and pretending not to see it. Guilt pressed against his chest, but he pushed it away. He told himself this refusal was justice, that he was finally speaking for the child who had never been heard. Yet the house felt heavier with each passing hour. Whispers followed him through the halls, not voices but memories. The walls seemed to echo with old arguments. Objects felt out of place as if disturbed by something unseen. The body remained unburied, waiting, patient in a way that felt wrong. Still, the son did not change his mind. He believed he had earned this moment, that withholding the burial was the only power left to him, that it was the final boundary he could draw between himself and the pain he carried. As night fell again, he sat alone, listening to the quiet. He told himself the matter was settled, that emotional justice had been served. But beneath that belief, something uneasy stirred. The bond between father and son had not broken cleanly. It had frayed, tangled, and tightened over time. And now, with death caught in the middle, neither love nor resentment had been given a place to rest. The son felt it then, not fully, not clearly, but enough to unsettle him. Some wounds do not close when ignored, and some refusals echo longer than intended. The first night after the refusal passed without sleep. The son lay on his bed, eyes open, listening to the house breathe. It made small sounds he had never noticed before, the soft creak of wood, the distant hum of the walls settling, the faint whisper of air slipping through cracks. Each sound felt closer than it should have been, as if the house had drawn in tight around him. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and broken. He dreamed of his father standing at the edge of a field, half hidden by fog. His face was calm but unfinished, like a memory missing its final shape. The son tried to move toward him, but the ground beneath his feet turned heavy, pulling him down. When he woke, his heart was racing and the room felt colder than before. He told himself it was stress. Grief did strange things to the mind. Everyone knew that. But the dreams returned the next night and the night after that. Each time the image shifted. Sometimes his father was closer, standing just beyond reach. Sometimes he was farther away, watching with tired eyes. The fog never lifted. The dream never ended the same way. During the day, the son tried to return to routine. He cleaned the house, answered calls he did not want to take, avoided rooms where memories felt too sharp. But small disturbances followed him. Objects were not where he remembered leaving them. A chair turned slightly toward the hallway. A door left open that he was sure he had closed. Once, he found the white cloth folded differently, as if careful hands had touched it. His chest tightened at the sight. He began locking doors, checking corners, moving with caution inside his own home. Still, he told himself there was a reasonable explanation. Grief could blur memory. Exhaustion could play tricks. At night, the sounds grew clearer. Slow footsteps brushed the edge of his awareness. Not loud enough to confront, not soft enough to ignore. The floorboards creaked in patterns that felt deliberate, measured. When he turned on the lights, nothing was there. He stopped inviting people over. The presence of others made the house feel tense, restless, as if it resented being observed. Friends noticed the change in him, his hollow eyes, his short temper, but he brushed off their concern. He told them he was fine. Inside he felt anything but. Sleep became rare. When it came, it dragged him into darker dreams. Memories he had buried rose to the surface, twisted and sharp. He relived moments he had forgotten, moments he wished he could erase. His father's disappointed stare. The sound of silence after arguments. The weight of words never spoken. The dreams did not feel random anymore. They felt guided. His health began to slip. His hands shook when he held a cup. His thoughts scattered, hard to gather. He caught his reflection in the mirror and barely recognized himself. He looked thinner, older, like someone carrying a burden too heavy for his frame. Isolation wrapped around him. Calls went unanswered. Messages piled up. The world outside the house felt distant, unreal. Inside, time moved differently, slow, thick, stretching each hour into something unbearable. He tried to explain it to himself in careful terms. This was guilt. This was punishment from his own mind. He had defied tradition, hurt people he loved. His conscience was fighting back. But guilt did not leave fingerprints on doors. One evening, as the sun faded and shadows gathered, the air shifted. The room felt tight, as if pressure had built without warning. The son stood still, listening, heart pounding. The white cloth stirred. Not much. Just enough to notice. A small movement, like fabric responding to a breath that was no longer there. The son froze. His mind raced for answers. Air currents settling floors, his own shaking hands. He stepped closer, every muscle tense. The cloth lay still again, innocent and quiet. He backed away, sweat cold on his skin. That night he did not sleep at all. As days passed, the presence grew heavier. Not louder, not violent, just constant. A pressure in the chest. A sense of being watched, not with anger, but with patience that felt endless. The son began to sense it in moments of stillness. When he paused in the hallway. When he stood at the sink, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. When he sat alone, surrounded by the echo of his thoughts. He felt a pull toward the room where the body lay. A quiet invitation he refused to answer. One morning he woke to the sound of breathing. Slow, steady, familiar. He sat up, frozen, listening. The sound faded, leaving behind a silence so deep it rang in his ears. His hands trembled as he pressed them to his chest, trying to steady himself. This was no longer imagination. Something had crossed a line. The house no longer felt like a place of mourning. It felt like a space caught between moments, neither fully alive nor fully at rest. The unfinished rituals weighed on every wall, every corner. The dead had not been guided away, and the living had not been spared. The son stood alone in the dim light, fear and guilt twisting together inside him. He understood it now, even if he refused to say it out loud. The disturbance was not random. It was not punishment without purpose. It was a reminder. As the room darkened and the air grew still, a shadow stretched along the wall, longer than it should have been, shaped in a way that made his breath catch. For the first time since his father's death, the son could no longer deny it. His father had not gone, and whatever remained was waiting to be acknowledged. The son did not scream when he felt it. Fear rose in him, sharp and cold, but it did not burst outward. It settled deep in his chest, heavy and steady, like something he had been carrying all his life and was only now learning to recognize. The presence was no longer hiding. It did not rush at him. It did not demand attention. It simply existed, firm, quiet, unavoidable. The same way his father had always existed in his life. Close enough to shape him. Distant enough to leave him alone. The shadow on the wall did not move like a threat. It shifted slowly, stretching and pulling back as if unsure of its own shape. The son stood frozen, heart pounding, waiting for anger, for blame, for punishment. None came. Instead, a memory surfaced without warning. He was young again, sitting at the table with homework spread out in front of him. His father stood nearby, watching. Not speaking, just watching. The silence had felt heavy then too, not cruel but strained. Like words were trapped behind something neither of them knew how to break. The memory faded, leaving behind the same quiet pressure in the room. The son realized then that what had returned was not rage. It was weight. He moved through the house carefully, aware of every step, every breath. The presence followed, not behind him, not beside him, but within the space itself. It settled in rooms where arguments had once taken place. It lingered near doorways where conversations had ended too soon. When the son entered the room where the body lay, the air changed. The white cloth remained still, untouched. Yet the room felt fuller, like it held more than it should. The son's chest tightened, not from fear alone, but from something closer to sorrow. He expected his father to appear clearly, to show his face, his form, something solid and final. Instead, the presence pressed against his thoughts, pulling memories forward like pages turned by unseen hands. Moments he had buried rose up. His father teaching him how to stand straight, correcting his posture with firm hands. His father sitting silently during family gatherings, eyes distant, lost in thoughts never shared. His father coughing late at night, alone, refusing help. Alongside these came moments the son had ignored. His father fixing things around the house without being asked. Leaving small gestures behind, food prepared, doors locked, lights turned off, acts of care performed quietly without praise. The son's throat tightened. He felt anger rise again, familiar and sharp. But it no longer stood alone. Beneath it was something softer. Something harder to face. Regret. The presence did not accuse him. It did not demand forgiveness. It simply brought truth forward, one memory at a time, forcing him to look. In the quiet, the son sensed his father's own struggle, the man behind the authority. A man shaped by fear of failure, by lessons passed down without kindness. A man who believed strength meant control, not openness. A man who wanted to do right but did not know how to reach across the distance he helped create. The son realized then that the improper burial was not the real wound. The wound had formed long before death. Leaving the body unburied was only the final echo of something deeper, the emotional abandonment both had practiced. Silence answering silence. Distance meeting distance. The presence grew clearer, not in form but in feeling. It no longer felt heavy with tension. It felt tired. The son's fear shifted into something else. His shoulders sagged. His breathing slowed. He felt the old defenses weaken, one by one. For the first time he did not try to justify himself. He did not argue in his head. He did not reach for explanations or moral strength. He simply stood there, allowing the weight of shared pain to settle. In that stillness he understood something painful and undeniable. His father had not returned to punish him. He had returned because something was unfinished. Words that were never spoken. Apologies that were never offered. Love that existed but was never expressed in a way that could be felt. The son felt trapped by it, by the same fear of vulnerability that had ruled his father. He saw the cycle clearly now, stretching backward through generations, each one passing down silence as if it were wisdom. The presence pressed gently, urging him not toward guilt but toward truth. The son's eyes burned. His chest ached. He wanted to run, to break free from the past pressing in around him. But there was nowhere to go. Both of them were caught here. One bound to the world by unfinished rights. The other bound by resentment that had outlived its purpose. The realization struck him with quiet force. They were not enemies in this moment. They were mirrors. The son lowered himself to the floor, exhaustion washing over him. The presence did not loom. It did not retreat. It stayed steady and watchful like it always had. In the silence, the son understood what this reckoning demanded. Not obedience. Not fear. Acknowledgement. Until that happened, neither of them would be free. After that night, the son could no longer pretend the house was only a house. Every room carried a feeling now. Not fear alone but memory. Guilt settled into the walls like dampness, impossible to ignore. The presence of his father no longer startled him. Instead, it followed him quietly, reminding him of everything he had tried not to feel. The dreams grew worse. They no longer faded when he woke. They clung to him through the day, leaving him tired and unfocused. In one dream he stood in an open grave, shoveling dirt that never ran out. In another he watched his father sink slowly into the ground, reaching up, not begging, not angry, just waiting. Each morning he woke with his heart pounding and his body aching. His head throbbed. His chest felt tight like something was pressing inward. Food lost its taste. Sleep no longer restored him. He moved through his days like a shadow of himself. People noticed. A friend stopped by one afternoon, concern written plainly on his face. The son tried to explain, but the words fell apart as he spoke. How could he describe a guilt that felt alive? A presence that was not cruel but constant? His friend suggested rest. Time away. Maybe speaking to someone. The son nodded, knowing none of that would help. As the days passed, his relationships began to crack. He snapped at people without meaning to. He withdrew when they tried to get close. The same patterns he had resented in his father now lived in him, clear and undeniable. That realization cut deeper than any fear. One evening, as he stood alone in the hallway, he caught his reflection in the dark window. His posture was rigid. His jaw clenched. His eyes held the same guarded look he had spent his life pushing against. For the first time he felt true shame. He saw how hatred had shaped him, not as strength but as armor. Heavy, stiff, and isolating. It had protected him once when he was younger and needed distance to survive. But now it was crushing him. The presence of his father seemed to soften as his understanding deepened. The air no longer felt tight with tension. Instead, it felt heavy with sadness. When memories surfaced, they carried less sharpness, more weight. The son began to see the damage clearly. By refusing the burial, he had not only trapped his father between worlds, he had trapped himself. Family members stopped calling. Neighbors whispered. Traditions meant to guide grief had been shattered, leaving everyone unsure where to place their pain. But the deepest harm lived inside him. Hatred had kept him from mourning, from grieving the father he had, and the one he never got. It had delayed his healing, turning sorrow into something bitter and endless. He noticed small, painful similarities between himself and his father. The way he avoided difficult conversations. The way he mistook control for safety. The way he feared vulnerability more than loneliness. Each realization felt like another layer of earth pressing down on him. The house reflected his inner decay. Dust gathered in corners he once kept clean. The white cloth dulled with time, no longer bright, no longer pure. The air felt stale as if it had stopped moving forward. The son understood the symbolism, even if he wished he didn't. Unfinished rituals rot. Not just in the ground but in the heart. One night he sat on the floor near the covered body, exhaustion pulling him down. He did not look directly at it. He didn't need to. Its presence filled the room. I thought I was strong, he admitted softly, more to himself than anything else. I thought holding back was power. The words trembled as they left him. In that moment the presence shifted. Not closer. Not farther. Just gentler. Like a hand loosening its grip. The son felt tears rise, surprising him. He had not cried when his father died. He had not cried during the arguments or the years of distance. But now the weight of everything pressed forward at once. He cried for the boy who learned to stay quiet. For the man who carried anger like a shield. For the father who never learned how to say what mattered. He cried because hatred had promised relief and delivered only emptiness. The presence did not disappear. But it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like shared grief. In that grief, the son finally understood the truth he had been avoiding. Hatred does not end pain. It extends it. It stretches suffering beyond its natural end, pulling it forward into every moment that follows. It keeps wounds open long after the danger has passed. By refusing forgiveness, he had kept both himself and his father bound to the same unresolved moment. The choice stood before him now, clearer than ever. He could remain where he was, protected by anger, imprisoned by it. Or he could step into something harder, something uncertain. Forgiveness. Not forgiveness as approval. Not forgiveness as forgetting. But forgiveness as release. The idea frightened him. If he let go of his anger, what would remain? Who would he be without it? The resentment had shaped him for so long that it felt like part of his identity. But another thought followed, quiet and steady. If he did not let go, this would never end. The dreams. The presence. The decay. The distance between the living and the dead. He looked around the room, seeing it clearly now, not as a place of punishment but of waiting. Waiting for him to decide. The presence felt closer then, not pressing, not demanding. Just present. Like his father had been, standing silently, unsure how to begin. The son drew in a slow breath. His chest ached, but it felt lighter than before. For the first time since his father's death, he did not feel trapped by the past alone. He felt held at a crossroads. And whatever he chose next would determine whether this weight remained, or finally began to lift. The decision did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, like a truth that had been waiting for permission to speak. The sun woke before dawn, the house wrapped in a gray stillness. For the first time in days, the air did not feel tight in his lungs. The presence remained, but it was different now, no longer heavy, no longer pressing. It felt like patience. He sat at the edge of his bed, hands resting on his knees, and understood what he had to do. This was not about tradition anymore. Not about proving anything to family or community. This was about facing what he had avoided for most of his life. About choosing to carry pain honestly instead of hiding behind anger. He rose slowly and began to prepare. Each small action felt deliberate. Washing his hands, straightening the room, opening windows to let fresh air move through the house. These were not tasks of duty but of intention. With every step, memories surfaced, some sharp, some gentle, and he did not push them away. He let them pass through him. As he stood near the covered body, his chest tightened. He did not rush. He breathed through the ache, reminding himself that this discomfort was part of the work. Redemption, he realized, was not a sudden moment of relief. It was endurance. It was choosing to stay present even when it hurt. The presence of his father felt calmer now, like a tide that had stopped rising. It lingered nearby, not watching, not judging, just there. The son bowed his head, not in obedience but in acknowledgement. He thought of the man his father had been. Strong in some ways, failing in others. A man shaped by fear and expectations he never questioned. A man who loved but did not know how to show it safely. He thought of himself too. Of the ways he had carried that same fear forward. Of the walls he had built and called strength. This burial would not erase those truths. But it could honor them honestly. The process moved slowly, marked more by reflection than motion. As preparations continued, the son felt layers peeling back inside him. Each memory acknowledged felt like soil being cleared away, not to hide the past but to place it gently where it belonged. He did not speak grand words. He did not ask for forgiveness out loud. Instead, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of loss, not just of his father but of the relationship that never fully existed. That grief was deeper than anger had ever been. The presence shifted again as the moment drew closer. It felt lighter now, less bound. The son sensed something loosening, though he knew release was not guaranteed. Forgiveness did not demand reward. It asked only for honesty. As the burial began, the son felt his hands tremble, not from fear but from vulnerability. He was no longer hiding behind defiance. He was exposed, standing with nothing but truth. He understood then that forgiveness was not an act toward his father alone. It was an act toward himself. Forgiving did not mean excusing the harm done. It did not mean pretending the pain never happened. It meant choosing not to let that pain decide the rest of his life. As the final moments approached, the son felt tears fall freely. He did not wipe them away. He let them fall, warm and real, mixing with the earth below. Each tear felt like a word that had never been spoken, finally released. In that moment, he mourned fully for the first time. He mourned the childhood shaped by silence. He mourned the man his father might have been. He mourned the years they both spent waiting for the other to reach out. The presence felt close, closer than ever, but not overwhelming. It felt peaceful, grateful perhaps, or simply relieved. As the burial was completed, the son stood still, breathing deeply. The world felt quieter but not empty. The silence now carried warmth instead of tension. Then, slowly he felt it. The presence began to fade. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. It softened, like mist lifting in the morning sun. The weight in his chest eased. The pressure he had carried for so long loosened its grip. There was no final sign. No voice. No vision. Just peace. The son stood there, hands at his sides, feeling the stillness settle around him. For the first time since his father's death, the quiet did not feel threatening. It felt earned. He remained there for a long time, letting the moment pass fully. Letting himself believe that this chapter, painful and unfinished, had finally been closed with care. When he turned to leave, the house felt different. Lighter. As if it could breathe again. He knew the scars would remain. Forgiveness did not erase memory. But it transformed it. It gave pain a place to rest. As he stepped forward into the coming day, the son understood something deeply and finally. He had not just buried his father. He had buried the anger that kept them both bound. And in doing so, he had chosen to live, free to carry love without fear and loss without chains. The days that followed felt unfamiliar, like waking in a house after a long storm and realizing the air had changed. The son noticed it first in the mornings. He woke without the tight weight on his chest. The silence no longer pressed against him. It rested around him, calm and open, allowing space for breath. The house sounded normal again, Wood settling, birds outside, distant life moving forward. The presence was gone. Not hidden. Not waiting. Gone. That knowledge brought relief, but it also brought something harder to face. Without the fear and tension, there was room for feeling. Real feeling. The kind that could not be pushed aside. Grief arrived quietly. It showed up when he passed familiar rooms, when he touched objects his father once used, when he caught himself listening for footsteps that would never return. This grief felt different from the anger he had carried before. It did not burn. It ached. And somehow that ache felt honest. The son moved through his days slowly, carefully, as if learning a new rhythm. His body still held the memory of stress, tight shoulders, restless hands, but each day the tension eased a little more. Sleep returned, though not perfectly. Some nights brought dreams, but they were softer now. Memories came without twisting into nightmares. His father appeared as he had been, flawed, quiet, human, no longer trapped in fog or silence. The son woke from those dreams with sadness, not fear. He began reaching out again. Calls were returned. Doors opened. Conversations resumed, awkward at first, then steadier. Some people did not understand his choices. Some never would. But he found that he no longer needed their approval to stand firm in his truth. When family members asked about the burial, he spoke simply. He did not defend himself. He did not explain every detail. He said only that he had done what was necessary. And for the first time he believed it fully. The scars remained. There were moments when anger tried to return, especially when old memories surfaced without warning. But now the son recognized it for what it was, a habit, not a command. He let it pass without feeding it. He noticed changes in himself that surprised him. He listened more. When someone spoke, he stayed present instead of planning his response. When conflict arose, he resisted the urge to shut down or take control. These small choices felt difficult at first, like learning to use muscles long ignored. But with practice they became natural. He understood now how easily pain could be passed down, disguised as strength. How silence could feel safer than honesty. How control could replace care when fear went unspoken. And he chose differently. The son treated others with a gentleness he had once denied himself. He spoke when something hurt. He allowed space for mistakes, his own and others. In doing so, he felt a quiet pride, not loud or boastful, but steady. Legacy, he realized, was not about perfection. It was about interruption. Breaking a cycle did not erase the past. It reshaped the future. There were days when the weight of forgiveness felt heavy again, not because it was wrong, but because it required effort. Forgiveness was not a single act. It was a practice. A decision renewed each time resentment tried to take root. On those days, the son reminded himself why he chose this path. He remembered the house when it felt trapped. The silence that suffocated instead of comforted. The cost of carrying hatred long after it had stopped protecting him. That memory kept him grounded. As weeks passed, the house filled with signs of life again. Windows stayed open. Light moved freely through the rooms. The white cloth was gone, replaced by space. Empty, yes, but not haunted. The son felt his father's absence clearly now. It was real and permanent. But it no longer felt unresolved. He visited the resting place once, standing quietly, hands folded, not out of duty but respect. He did not speak long. He didn't need to. What mattered had already been acknowledged. Walking away, he felt a sense of calm settle over him. Not happiness exactly, but acceptance. He carried both love and disappointment now, side by side, without letting either rule him. That balance felt fragile but strong enough. In moments of reflection, the son understood the cost of delayed forgiveness. How many years had been lost to silence? How much pain had grown simply because it was never named? But he also understood something else. It was not too late to live differently. The past would always exist. It shaped him, marked him. But it did not have to define every step forward. As he moved into his days, working, connecting, choosing openness, he felt something new take root. Freedom. Not the kind that erased pain, but the kind that allowed him to carry it without being crushed. He had forgiven his father. And in doing so, he had forgiven himself for surviving the only way he knew how. The house stood quiet behind him, no longer holding its breath. Life, imperfect and honest, moved on. And for the first time, the son moved with it, no longer bound by what had been left unsaid, but guided by what had finally been understood. Time moved forward as it always did, but the son learned that moving forward did not mean leaving everything behind. Something stayed. Not as ghosts. Not as burdens. As lessons. He often thought about how easily the living speak of the dead as if they are gone completely. As if burial ends every bond. As if earth and ritual can close what the heart never opened. He knew better now. The dead do not stay with us because they want to haunt us. They stay because something remains unfinished. Unspoken love. Unreleased anger. Forgiveness delayed too long. These are the graves we carry inside ourselves. The son understood that his refusal had never truly been about the burial. It had been about refusing to let go of pain he had learned to live with. Pain that once protected him. Pain that later imprisoned him. He had mistaken holding on for strength. In truth, it was fear. Fear of admitting loss. Fear of acknowledging love that had been flawed but real. Fear of becoming vulnerable in a world that once felt unsafe. When he finally let himself grieve, not just the man his father was, but the relationship they never fully had, something shifted. The weight he carried did not disappear. It changed shape. It became something he could hold without being crushed. He realized then that forgiveness is not a gift given to the dead. It is a release given to the living. The son still remembered the silences, the sharp looks, the distance. Forgiveness had not erased those memories. It had simply loosened their grip. They no longer controlled his breathing, his sleep, his choices. They existed, but they no longer ruled him. In quiet moments, he reflected on how easily unresolved emotions pass through generations. How parents hand down fear and control without meaning to. How children grow into adults carrying wounds they never chose. Breaking that cycle did not require perfection. It required courage. The courage to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. The courage to speak truth without cruelty. The courage to bury what no longer needed to be carried. The son thought often of that first night after the burial was complete. The peace that followed. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just stillness that felt earned. That stillness had taught him something important. Peace does not come from denial. It comes from acknowledgement. We carry the dead not in our arms but in our habits. In our reactions. In the ways we love and withhold love. When we refuse to face those influences, they shape us quietly, endlessly. But when we face them, when we name them, mourn them, forgive them, they loosen their hold. The son no longer feared memory. He welcomed it even when it hurt. Pain, he learned, was not the enemy. Unfelt pain was. There were days when the past surfaced unexpectedly. A phrase spoken the wrong way. A look that reminded him of old disappointments. In those moments, anger stirred, but it no longer took over. He breathed. He chose differently. That choice, repeated over time, became a way of living. He began to understand that forgiveness is not weakness. It does not excuse harm or rewrite history. It simply refuses to let yesterday decide tomorrow. It is survival. As seasons changed, the son carried his story quietly. He did not speak of it often. He did not need to. The lesson lived in how he showed up, in patience instead of control, in listening instead of silence, in honesty instead of distance. When he stood alone at dusk one evening, watching light fade the way it had on the night of his father's death, he felt no fear. The memory returned, but it was different now. Where once there had been imbalance, there was understanding. Where once there had been defiance, there was resolve. He had learned that improper burials are not only about bodies left unburied. They are about grief left untouched. Love left unspoken. Forgiveness postponed until it becomes poison. The dead do not ask for perfection. They ask for truth. As night settled, the son felt gratitude, not for the pain but for what it had taught him. He had faced the weight of hatred and chosen to set it down. He had learned that carrying the dead means choosing what we take forward, and what we finally let rest. The silence around him was gentle now. Not empty. Complete. And in that quiet, the son stood steady, no longer haunted by what he refused to bury, but strengthened by what he finally laid to rest.